Hey everyone, and welcome to a new video. So some of you might have seen it, but I'm here for everyone who didn't. But there's a new patch for Outward. This is not really a surprise, considering some of the changes that we see in there are we're already on the public test branch. We'll talk a bit more about that. But it had been quite a few months since they put these changes on a public test branch. So I was not completely surprised, just I for a minute thought they completely forgot about this small update. So I'm going to just go over the changes and give my opinion about them. And I'm not going to touch too much on the fixes because there's a lot of fixes. But I'm mostly going to talk about the changes. So added an invert camera X-axis option, and not too much to talk about this. Iron wristband can now be purchased from CSO's blacksmith. So this is something that we can talk about, especially since if you look at it, there's also this change. Iron knuckles recipe has been changed, so it doesn't need a bozu height anymore. This means only one thing, that they want people to be able to craft iron wristbands from the first region, which is, in my opinion, a good change, because it is necessary that, you know, they make all weapon types available right from the start, and starting with knuckles was not the best, considering the only option you had was, well, to craft the linen ones, which were pretty bad. Shield charge can now be performed while being sheathed. This is an interesting change. So there's a lot of spells, skills that are going to change if your weapon is sheathed or not, especially if you cast a bit of magic. For example, for runes, rune magics makes you sheathe your weapon, which is a bit annoying sometimes. But when it comes to shield charge, there's just it used to be like if you wanted to perform a shield charge and your weapon was sheathed, the character would first unsheath the weapon and then use the shield charge, which would sometimes completely break the rhythm you wanted to go with, and kind of made you take undeserved hits. Which so I think it's quite a good change which will allow you to use shield charge sometimes as a disengage tool to give you the time to unsheath your weapon. So better reaction to ambushes, I guess. Using flamethrower with a virgin lantern enchanted with copper flame enchantment now inflicts extreme poison instead of regular poison. So it's basically a buff of copper flame. I don't think a lot of people used copper flame except to, you know, test it and see what it did. So it's kind of a buff to lantern builds in general, because being able to inflict extreme poison is great. So poison is not the best alone, but it means that you'll probably now be able to stack better dots with lantern builds, which is always great. It increases any buffs like these for completely underused things, like the Virgin Lantern enchantments, is always great because it gives us opportunity to make more viable builds, and I just like it. A lot of things to say about the next one. Poltergeist enchantment now converts 50% of the physical damage to raw damage and repairs 0.5 durability per second. This change, I'm not sure how much impact it's going to have. The problem with the previous version of Poltergeist is that it was completely overshadowed by Whiplash. So Whiplash increases, if my memory is correct, the current damage of a physical weapon you enchanted with, current physical damage, by 10%. And the previous Poltergeist reduced your current physical damage and gave you a percentage of it in raw damage. So it's now a complete conversion and this repair. The main problem I see with this is that raw damage is still unaffected by most damage buffs. No, so it's unaffected by all physical buffs. The only thing it is affected by, if my memory is correct, is the passive alchemical experiment from the Levantine questline, which increases any damage source by 10 or 15%, I think. So it's the only thing it's affected by. This means that most likely Whiplash is still going to be the go-to in most builds. Well, I have not done any math on this, so I'm not sure. But I see this as a great way to play around in some more tank-oriented builds. So, for example, if you want to play a kind of tank-oriented build, it's probably going to be quite good on vampiric weapons. Imagine using some quite heavy armor and going with a vampiric weapon enchanted with Poltergeist. Resistances is probably going to increase the amount of heal you get from damage. So probably not too bad. Mostly going to be used, I think, when you want to go with heavier armor or armor that does not boost physical damage. So it's not that much of a boost to Poltergeist, that it is a buff of some more tankier builds that do not rely as much on pure damage increase. So probably, I think it's a good change overall, because Poltergeist has been slept on because it was weak for a long time. The main problem I see is that some people are probably going to use it with Zara weapons, and it's completely lost on Zara weapons because the 0.5 durability repair per second is completely useless on a weapon that has no durability. But you still have this 50% raw damage, which is interesting. So probably, in my opinion, it's going to be great on vampiric weapons. I have to test that. Let's go to the next one. So great change. Desert Corpish can now receive the Warm Memento or Rainbow Hex Enchantment. I think that's a funny change, because I know it's something that literally some guy requested on Discord. It's like, hey, how come the Desert Corpish, which is such a cool looking weapon, does not have a specific enchantment? And the devs were like, oh yeah, you're right, let's give it some enchantments. I think it's quite coherent that it got the Warm Memento. Warm Memento is great, but it's not the best enchantment, far from it, because the weapons that it has it gives stats to are not great at all. I think the only weapon on which Warm Memento is great is probably the Old Legion Spear, because it has a crazy reach advantage and it fits well in this playstyle. It's mostly going to be, I think, an alternative, a style, a visual, an aesthetic alternative to the steel saber of a Cerulean saber, because of Rainbow Hex. It's used in the Thanos Snap build, where you build up some hexes with the Rainbow Hex enchantment, and then you just snap your fingers for a big explosion. So it's probably going to be an aesthetic in which the weapon of a damage does not matter at all, by the way. So it's mostly, I think, going to be an alternative to these, because the Desert Corpish does not, while looking incredible, does not have the best stats in the world. Removed mana cost penalty in Master Kazai boots. So I think that's just pure coherence. Like, I never understood why there was a cost penalty on Master Kazai boots. Maybe it was to not make them too powerful, because they are a very powerful piece of equipment. Like, you have to keep in mind that in Outward, most of the mana cost penalties are on headset for lore thing. Basically, mages, in order to use magic, have to be connected to the local ley line, and this connection comes through the head. So wearing a heavier helmet reduces your connection to your ley line, and so reduces your connection to magic. And that's why there is a mana cost penalty on helmets, especially heavy helmets. But I never really understood why there was a negative mana cost penalty on Master Kazai boots, so I think it's great that they removed it. A fix for Backpack losing its interaction prompt when switched between players in split co-op. Since I don't play much in split co-op, I don't think I've played it at all. I'm not familiar with this problem, and I don't understand why it's not in the fixed part, by the way. Dodge action is now slowed when the Chalcedony and charged backpack is equipped. So I think that's a funny change. So we have to understand that the devs of Outward don't like when we cheese challenges. And this is linked, so for those who are not familiar with the Caldera questline, and a lot of people have not done it, there's a part when you need to equip this big Chalcedony backpack, and it's a big stone that you put on your back, and you need to go in the middle of a volcano, which is at the heart of a dungeon, and charge it. There's a lot of dangerous enemies in there. And the way you used to do it, since you can't have your own backpack equipped because you have this stone at the back, is you wouldn't fight anything, you would just attract the enemies and make them fight each other, and use that to charge the backpack and run away. And since your dodge was not impeded, well, it was quite easy to do, despite looking like a hard thing. So this is just the devs reacting to us cheesing this quest. Now I guess it's going to be harder to cheese the hell out of it. Just the devs playing with our minds. I've already talked about the Iron Knuckles, and Gong Strike explosion radius has been increased, so it's just a buff to Gong Strike. Basically, they buffed some unused things, which is great. Maybe Gong Strike is going to be better. Like, the interesting thing with Gong Strike is that it's especially powerful with a mace build, because, you know, mace infusion can absorb some boons, and when Gong Strike, you strike your weapon on your shield to consume the boon and make an explosion. So with Mace Infusion, you can basically recharge that boon all the time and use Gong Strike all the time. So I think it's great because people kind of don't use Gong Strike, but it's quite fun to use, especially because it consumes, well, the infusion you have on your weapon, which is without Mace Infusion quite hard to maintain, because you have to use consumables or spells that have a relatively high cooldown. So it's a great change. I'm not going to go over all the fixes because there's a lot of them, and to be honest, I was not even aware of a lot of the issues. The only issues I really faced was what was it? I faced this one, fixed an issue where it would not be possible to block anymore after being knocked down while casting a spell. This one I faced quite a few times, which is completely annoying. I think I faced this one, where, you know, I would be able to apply to use some enchantments that I was not supposed to use to. It works even during the day. So yeah, it's great that we see these fixes. It's great to see that despite most of their efforts have probably been shifted to Outward 2, which is great because I want Outward 2 as soon as possible. Take your time though. It's great to see that they're not completely abandoned Outward 1, because it still needs some changes. I think there's some changes I've talked about that have not been fixed. I'll probably put it back in the fixes, but I think there's some issues with the music in some areas. For example, in some underground parts of Old Levant, of the slide, whenever there's combat, it's the Abersour outside music that's playing instead of the Abersour combat music. And in the Sorborians DLC, there's a few bugs with the music. For example, there's an insane musical theme, which is called Mini Boss in the soundtrack of the Sorborians DLC, and it's not played anymore. It used to play when you were fighting the mini bosses in the underground dungeon, but it's not playing anymore. Well, now it's just basic combat music from the different areas, and I think that's a shame because it's an incredible musical theme, and I'll probably report it again in order for him to try and fix it. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. If you like this video, do not hesitate to, subscribe for more, especially considering that with Outward 2 and Witherbloom that are coming, not soon, but I'll keep you updated on anything we get on this side, and obviously I'll keep doing some more content on Outward and other games, so if you're interested, do not hesitate to stay here to keep and subscribe to be updated. Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you again. Bye.